For a US-Canada trade deal remain unresolved and could take weeks, that according to Ottawa's chief negotiator. This development follows US President Donald Trump's recent executive order raising tariffs on Canadian imports from 25% to 35% on products not covered by the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement, also known as the USMCA. The tariffs affect critical Canadian sectors including steel, aluminium and automobiles, despite over 90% of Canada's exports entering the US duty-free. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney emphasised the need to reset bilateral relations, condemning the tariffs as disruptive to long-standing trade and security ties. Federal Minister Dominic LeBlanc, responsible for US trade relations, reaffirmed Canada's position to accept only a beneficial agreement and highlighted ongoing talks aimed at resolving key sectoral disputes. The Trump administration also expressed dissatisfaction with Canada's refusal to remove countermeasures initially imposed under former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who resigned in March and was succeeded by Mark Carney. Trade experts and business leaders in Canada have voiced concern over the stalled negotiations and the economic risks posed by the ongoing tariff conflict. Well, this, of course, a situation that has toed and froed Mark Carney and Donald Trump meeting at the G7 summit. And at that point, there was optimism that a deal could be done before the deadline. That doesn't seem to be the case. And, of course, scepticism as to whether that will be done in time has now turned into a reality. And now concern as well that a deal might take weeks to be completed. But the situation is not as direct as some other countries. Of course, there is the Canada, Mexico, US deal and an agreement that is in place, and that does see duty-free exports in certain areas. So the situation is, of course, complex. And joining us to discuss that is Sharad Kohli, an economist joining us live from New Delhi. Sharad, thank you for your time. We mentioned there, of course, that the responses from Canada, the fact that it might take weeks for another deal to be done. But can you tell us specifically how this new rate will impact Canada and the United States, both from a business perspective but also from a consumer perspective?
I think they're going to be detrimental for both the countries, and Canada has been against this deal, against the tariffs from the beginning. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
So Canada has been against the tariffs from day one, and Mark Carney has been very clear on that, and there was some improvement as compared to when the change of government happened. But then Canada was very categorical, and I'm surprised at the US because Canada is, Mexico and Canada are two of the largest partners, trading partners of the US. And for US to be doing this to Canada and trying to dictate terms with Canada, I think Canada doesn't seem to be succumbing to it. I mean, each country's sovereignty has to be respected, and the country has a right to decide on the structure of its economy. The structure of each economy is very, very unique. We should not forget that Canada has a population of little over 30 million, whereas America's population is far higher. It's more than 300 million for that matter. So there's a stark difference between the economies of the two countries, between the population of two countries, between the economic size of the two countries. So I think when a bilateral deal happens, you have to respect each other's size, the structure, the requirements. And I personally feel that deals cannot be done under force. You cannot bully somebody for a deal. And that's what is the bone of contention between America and Canada, as it is like in case of America and India, as it is like in the case of so many other countries to whom letters have been issued at very high tariffs. So eventually, I think America will have to understand, and of course, there are two other factors which are counting on America's mind. One is recognition of Palestine by Canada, and of course, Greenland was another issue which was being spoken of. And then let's not forget that America wanted Canada to be the 51st state. So, with those kind of very, very strange responses coming from the US and very, very, very freak remarks coming from the US over a period of time, I'm sure the Canadian people, the Canadian government, whichever party it may belong to, is not very happy. So this might take some time to settle down because the size of trade between the two countries is humongous. So both the countries cannot afford to let this situation remain in a stalemate.
Yes, absolutely. And Sharad, let's look now at the politics behind this. Of course, you've mentioned the key players there, but there was rhetoric from Donald Trump ahead of the Canadian election talking about making Canada the 51st state, and also several other points which Canadian people didn't enjoy hearing relating to sovereignty and other matters. Do you think that that has played a part in some of Trump's actions at all?
Well, Trump's actions have been a mix of politics and trade. He is a businessman. He's a hardcore businessman. We all know that. I think when he does a deal, like I can cite you an example. When it came to the Indian tariffs, which he levied 25%, he mixed up two things. He says partly it's because of the trade deficit we have with India, and partly is also because India is a member of BRICS. India is importing oil from Russia. India is importing defense equipment from Russia, which is killing so many people in Ukraine and so on and so forth. So President Trump does try to mix trade with politics, but I have my doubt because he's a hardcore businessman. So from inside, I feel that he's purely keeping the deal considerations in mind. But what fails to, what I fail to understand here is that can America, in a situation where these deals do not go through, in a situation where these goods from, for example, from Canada, they land up in America, and practically, from Canada, America is importing practically everything, from fruits and vegetables to some very high-tech stuff as well. So when these goods land in America, they're going to be expensive for the American people. Inflation is going to get fueled from here. So how is America going to handle that situation is what I fail to comprehend, because this is a kind of, I call it as a self-destructive move, because you're trying to harm your own economy. Of course, first you harm the exporters of the other country, but then at the end of the day, if you continue importing at these tariffs, your treasury may be able to collect some more revenue. But then what about the American people? I think those people will have to ultimately consume the goods at higher prices. Or option two is that you start manufacturing these goods within your country, which is not possible because the cost of production in the US and the cost of cultivating them in the US is so high that US people or US consumers will not be able to afford that. That is something which I'm finding hard to digest. And I hope in the coming weeks, this grim reality is going to come to the ground when I think President Trump is going to understand that he may be trying to make America great again, MAGA as they say, but in the process, he might end up making America expensive again as it was after COVID.
Sharad Kohli, thank you ever so much for your time and that insight.